I first talked about climate change, I was a graduate student in the 60s. My professor would come back from meetings and talking about the droughts in the Sahel in Africa. Was this due to possibly a change of the climate, or would it just cycle back in time? And so we, climate scientists, were researching this in the 60s and 70s. We are seeing in many places conflict initiated over water. I'm doing a project now on climate as a national security issue. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom said that this is the threat multiplier. When you superimpose a changing climate and the stressors, we are now talking about that from a point of view of security, of human security, water security of countries and peoples, that climate has the potential to overwhelm all the others.
In the last 12 months, the Arctic has lost 22% of its ice mass during the summer months. Earth is almost now 1 degree warmer than pre-industrial times, and scientists are now focusing on the effects of these changes. They are now moving from calling it global warming to climate change due to its warming effect. But climate change does not accurately describe the events that are happening in the world. Let's call it for what it's becoming, and that is climate extremes. This next review is just from the last 6 months.
In a study which is the first of its kind, NASA researchers have found that lakes around the world have been warming over the last 25 years, and that some of those lakes' temperatures have actually risen more quickly than the air temperature around the lakes, which is pretty astonishing.
They took it from 167 different lakes from around the world, and what they concluded was that the average rise per decade over the last 25 years was 0.85 degrees. And that some lakes actually increased by close to 2 degrees, 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit.
Russia's in flames. The hottest summer on record has also become one of the most destructive.
Massive forest fires have already burnt about 1,000 of hectares of land in Russia, killed more than 40 and left more than 2,000 homeless.
Overnight, Julia did a relatively very surprising and relatively unusual rapid intensification that far east. It's the farthest east we found in our database of a storm reaching Category 4 intensity. Another factoid is we have 2 Category 4 hurricanes going simultaneously. The last time we recorded that incidence was way back in 1926.
Millions of gallons of water pouring through the Swat Valley, a force of nature with no respect for the route it takes or the millions of people it's affecting. This is the principal town of Mingora in Swat, streets and roads submerged, houses hidden beneath tons of muddy water, here flowing over the roof of one. People can only look on helplessly from the town's main bridge, but even this is under threat of collapse. Local residents unable to protect their homes as they slide helplessly into the River Swat. As the waters recede for a short time, the extent of the damage is becoming more evident. Mingora's main bridge, where people were viewing the river, soon collapsed after we filmed there. The main communication link to both sides of the town and beyond severed. These children swim across determined to get to the other side. It's a problem the local police have too, as they recover their weapons from the flooded police station, their vehicles inoperable, smashed by the weight of water that hit them. Above Dera Ismail Khan and Tank, the scale of the flooding can be seen. Large swathes of land submerged under millions of gallons of rainwater.
In a suburb of Medellin, rescue workers dig through the sodden soil that's buried a community. More than 100 people are thought to be missing, and 20 bodies have already been pulled out. For those who've lost relatives and friends, the distress is simply too much. Rain has lashed down on Colombia and neighboring Venezuela, causing the worst flooding in the region for more than 40 years. In Barranquilla, streets are flooded and houses wrecked, and residents like Nubia Mosquera are struggling to cope.
This is terrible. We don't know what to do with the children. We have fungus. We are desperate. Frankly, we have already lost everything.
In Venezuela, 70,000 people have been forced from their homes. Refuges have been set up, but there are simply too many people.
Snowstorm leaves more than 300 people stranded. on the highway in southern Ontario. The highway is shut down indefinitely and under a state of emergency. We're told the Canadian military has brought in search and rescue helicopters to help drivers. Brandon Junkin joins me now to tell us what he is seeing.
Correct. It was literally a full-on whiteout. I'm an avid outdoors. I like being outdoors and in the wintertime as well, but I've never been in something like that. You're driving along, and it was okay. The driving, it was snowy, but then it got so bad that you couldn't actually see the road even below you. If you were to look out your window and look down, you could no longer see the road at all. And at that point, I basically just kind of slowed down I didn't want to stop quickly. I was afraid vehicles behind me might hit me. When I tried to open my door and realized the snow was now 4 feet to 5 feet against the side of my truck, I just realized there's no way I'm going to make it. So I just sat there. But you couldn't tell where you were at all, because it turns out once they dug me out here about an hour ago there, when they dug us out, I only had to drive about half a mile up the road, and I was at a restaurant, gas station, everything was right here, and this is where everybody's been sitting.
Were there other people around you?
Yeah, there was about 10 cars behind me, and all the rest were big transport trucks all lined up in front of me, but you could only see, at best, maybe one car. That was at best. If the wind stopped for a minute, I was only 5 feet behind the transport truck that was in front of me, and I didn't realize it wasn't until morning. He'd actually jackknifed in that position, and his cab was spun around, but I never saw him until I couldn't actually see it until morning. Even though he had the rig on all night with the lights on, I couldn't actually see the front of it.
We have also seen dramatic flooding in both Newfoundland and the Maritimes.
The roads in the northwest have been worst hit. On the M6 near Manchester, hundreds of drivers have been stranded in their cars overnight, falling below -16. But snow is causing most problems this morning. There have been up to 15 inches in the northwest of England.
Some people still question whether our planet's climate is changing as rapidly and profoundly as the majority of scientists suggest. Perhaps this is understandable. Throughout the year, people are bombarded with figures and data on climate change in a variety of formats. Some changes seem so slight that it's difficult to see why scientists are so concerned. Every day, the Dow Jones Index condenses complex markets into one figure. Could the complexity of the Earth's climate be distilled down to a single number to show the scale of change? The International Geosphere-Biosphere Programme has taken a first step by creating a climate change index. The index brings together changes in atmospheric carbon dioxide, temperature, sea level, and Arctic sea ice. The result is dramatic. This new approach dampens fluctuations caused by natural variability. In doing so, it exposes the underlying trend. The change is unequivocal. It is global, and significantly, it is in one direction. The reason for concern becomes clear. In just 30 years, we are witnessing major planetary scale changes. Do we know fully the consequences of our actions?
At first glance, a flood in Venezuela and 3 feet of snow in the United Kingdom may not have anything in common. But in fact, these extreme weather events are all caused by the Earth warming. This warming comes from our production and use of fossil fuels. We need to drastically reduce the use of fossil fuels, gas and oil, or these extreme weather events will not only continue, but actually become our norm. Scientists say we need to reduce our use of fossil fuels by 80% by 2050. We can do this, but it starts with you and I.